Hi guys, welcome to the Strange Man channel. In this video I will tell interesting stories. Once you were old enough, what were the dark family secrets you were finally let in on? Story 1. That my favorite cousin wasn't missing. All I knew growing up, he was 13 years older than me, was that he would come and go a lot. He lived with us when I was a baby, and after he moved out he would visit every 6 months or so out of the blue, but we never visited him or called him. His visits were one of my favorite things in the world. I loved him like a brother. By the time I was a teenager I did understand that he had issues with his parents. They had kicked him out at 13 and my parents took him in. But that kind of childhood messes with you. In between visits to my parents he avoided the rest of the family, moved a lot, and didn't hold jobs for long, which is why my parents didn't always know where he was. But in my later teens he stopped coming over at all. I asked repeatedly if anyone had heard from him and I was told no. I asked about contacting him and was told no one had a number or address for him. He would come around when he felt like it, but it stretched on for years. I really worried he was dead, and I really missed him. In my later 20s I finally found out that everyone knew where he was the whole time. He was in prison for murder. From what I hear it was actually somewhat justified. He was defending his new wife, who I never got to meet. I also found out some super shitty things about how the extended family sided with his up parents and refused to help him or his wife when he got arrested. And that they shamed my dad into not helping either. I tried to send a message to him in prison, but I don't know if he ever got it. I wish he knew that I didn't turn my back on him for decades like everyone else did. I just didn't know. Story 2. I've never really shared this with anyone, but here we go. So, my brother used to molest me when I was about 6 years old and he was about 11 or 12. As a kid I didn't think anything of it. I was also introduced to at a real young age. In my early 20s I was at a low point in life and this was really coming back to haunt me. I have 2 other siblings, both older than my brother, and I broke down and called my oldest sister and confessed what happened to her. She broke down crying and told me about our dark family cycle. My oldest sister used to get molested by my grandfather. She then stated molesting my other sister, who stated molesting my brother, who did the same to me. I told my mother about it and she was so broken. She blamed herself because she used to get molested by my grandfather as well. I don't blame her for anything. I don't blame any of them for what happened. You grandpa, you piece of human being. Story 2. Not very much a secret, but took me until I was older to understand what was happening. My mom would sometimes have us play a game called Army, which consisted of me, my mom, and my siblings army crawling around our apartment. Kind of a hide-and-seek style game. She would yell "hit the deck" randomly and we would all drop and find a hiding spot. We would giggle and giggle while my mom army crawled around looking for us. We loved the game so much. I realized a few years ago while retelling the story that we lived in a really terrible neighborhood, and she would yell it out when she heard gunshots outside the building. I'm assuming she was worried about stray bullets. Edit. I shared everyone's amazing comments with my mom, and she shed a tear. She feels very appreciated on International Women's Day today. Story 3. My step-grandfather has always been an alcoholic. As a child, he even taught me how to mix his favorite drink. As kid at like 6 years old, I would mix his drink as he liked and bring it into him in the living room. Don't ask what the drink was a mix off cause I literally can't remember. And my grandpa always acted funny. I always liked spending time with him cause I found him funny. So I never saw the bad side of his alcoholism and he never made me drink or anything. So overall he didn't have any negative impact on me at all. But before I was born he could get so drunk he threatened to kill my grandma, and when he got in a car accident and came home he was bleeding badly from his head and he started saying my granny shot him. He even threw out some of the wedding pictures my parents had. I never knew how horrible he was. Maybe cause he liked kids or something. He would make me cocoa and watch Garfield with me when I was a kid. He was never a bad influence in my life. So it was so weird to me when I found out these things about him. Before he died though, he really regretted drinking, and he completely stopped. He became really depressed too until his granddaughter, biological, was born. He was so happy about his granddaughter. He died regretting everything, and a sober man who was happy to have been able to meet his one and only biological granddaughter. Regardless of everything, he really changed in the end and everyone was really upset he died. Story 4. When I was young I thought it was really nice that my nana lived with my aunt and her family since she was getting on a bit and it meant she was looked after and there were always people around. Aunt has 6 kids. Occasionally Aunt would gripe about being the one looking after Nana since Aunt is also one of many kids, and being young I sympathized, but given they all spent loads of time with Nana too, didn't think it was a big deal. You don't think about financial responsibility when you're young, I think. Just social and caring. Well, it turns out the reason Nana lives with Aunt is because Aunt and her husband convinced Nana to put the house in their name so they could look after her affairs and sold it out from under her and invested the money in a pyramid scheme. so it's gone now. Because of this, her siblings refuse to give Aunt a penny towards looking after Nana. Since it's her fault, Nana has no money or assets and instead pay to take Nana out all the time, meals, shopping, activities, so she doesn't go without. But they let Aunt struggle under the weight of Nana's general living expenses. Aunt's kids are all independent now, so they are not going to be impacted by money problems. Now I look back at her griping with annoyance and think what a terrible person she is. Story 5. My grandfather killed his youngest brother to get out of going to Vietnam. He, his brother, and 2 of their friends had their numbers called in the draft for Vietnam. They didn't want to go, obviously, but they didn't come from money and all work to support their families. If they got arrested, they'd lose their jobs and their families would lose their income. So they decided on a different plan to get out of going. They would drive to get their medical checks together, and on the way there they would drive the car into a tree. The plan was to get too injured to get sent to war, but not so injured as to be permanently crippled, and it had to look like an accident so nobody got arrested. This was in country Western Australia, so they were all going to say they swerved to miss a kangaroo and hit the tree. My grandfather was driving, his friend was in the passenger seat, and the other 2 were in the back. His brother was behind the passenger seat. They hit the tree doing about 40 kph, enough to be serious. A broken leg for my grandfather, a broken arm for the guy behind him, and broken ribs all around. They definitely weren't going to war. The problem was that for maximum impact, and because this was rural Australia in the 60s, they weren't wearing seatbelts, and nobody found them or their car for an hour or so, and nobody considered internal injuries in this plan. And my grandfather's brother bled to death from a ruptured spleen in the back seat. He was dead before they got to a hospital. My grandfather never forgave himself, and he never talked about it. My grandma was the only one he ever told, as far as we know, and she didn't tell my mother and I until long after his death. We found a small box in their bedroom when we were cleaning out the house after she died last year. It had a clipping from the local newspaper at the time about the accident. It said that they had swerved to miss a roo and called it a tragedy. I don't think my mother told any of her siblings, so technically this is still the family secret. I guess now you're all in on it. Story 6. My grandfather, who was my mother's stepfather, molested my mother when she was 6 and he repeatedly raped her older sister. My grandmother knew about it and kicked him out only for a short while. Then she took him back in and kicked out her 14-year-old daughter, my mom's older sister, and sent her to live with her stepmother and biological father, knowingly full well her stepmother beat the crap out of her on a regular basis. My mother told me when I was an adult and complaining about how my grandma was because she never let me go fishing with my grandpa and always let my brother go. Turns out my grandma knew he had a thing for little girls and at least tried-ish to make sure my sister and I were never alone with him. Thankfully, neither my sister nor I were molested by him, even though my mother tried repeatedly to get me alone with him. I also realized in my 30 seconds, after a decade of therapy and different meds, that my mother was severely abusive towards me via emotional incest. She found out I was being sexually abused by my older brother and made it a point to leave me alone with him as often as possible and make me ask him and be alone with him to use family items like the computer or PlayStation. She would wait until he was done and then make me go give her a back rub while she was and sleep in her bed with her. She and my aunt both swear they're not messed up and still hang out with my grandma and grandpedo. I don't really talk with that side of the family anymore. Story 7. I am the dark family secret. Stepdads abused me for 9 years. My mom pressed charges when it was convenient for her. I was 15, she was leaving him. She told my entire family and spent years shouting it from the hilltops for sympathy. My youngest sibling was probably 4 or 5 when he was first explicitly told. Stepdad's 3 sons, my half-brothers, have always been told it was a lie, despite his mother recently, when I was 27, asking if it was true and apologizing profusely when I said it was. I still have a relationship with my step-grandparents and don't fault them for how their son turned out. They're just trying their best to make sure my brothers end up all right. His family will always deny it, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing. My bio dad also didn't know I was alive until my mom told him when I was 17. His family doesn't know about me. I don't mind, I don't care to get to know them. My mom's family is very supportive of me, so I don't feel compelled to meet his family. I haven't spoken to my mother in over 2 years. Well guys, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye everyone.